This is the Bailed Out Podcast,
You have rights. Nobody knows how to deal with the bureaucracy.
where we talk bail to keep you out of jail.
The only thing that saved me each time is I wasn't drunk.
Does that mean you're a really bad driver then?
Hosted by Sean Plotkin, a multi-generational bail agent and 5-star author. And John Roraba, a non-profit founder and attorney who has helped over 20,000 families.
We're not far right, we're not far left, we're very neutral, I hope.
Bail is the balance.
John, what is justice?
That is what the court system is there to establish.
Bailed Out is brought to you in part by searchandmate.com, Turning Leaf, and Angels Bail Bonds. Now, please welcome your hosts, Sean and John.
You're not really feeling it right now.
I am not used to taking directions from others. I just do what I want, when I want, how I want it, and I know how to organize my brain that way.
We should get your wife to come stand over us.
I won't do any good. I just this is the core of me that really pushes through these kinds of things. But I recognize the value. I know that it's good, and this is going to be one of these episodes where we get to talk about current events and our experience, and what California has been continuing doing. So with the legislature, we've got 2 bills again affecting bail that are directly related to us and our experience. So talk about that'll be good.
Let's start. All right. I'd like to introduce John Rohrabaugh, foremost bail expert attorney in the United States. Some would argue otherwise. They're wrong.
I don't know that anyone would argue.
No, well, then they're not good enough to argue.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's what I've focused my whole career on. I had the good luck of going to law school with a bail agent and started working with his dad's attorneys in the early '90s, and that's all I've done. So I hope I've done it well. I feel like I've made a contribution as an attorney, which is not always an easy thing to do as an attorney.
Definitely not.
So
And who am I?
Who are you? This is Sean Plotkin. Yes, yes. So it's so nice to have you with me, Sean, and I really appreciate your real world experience and being able to understand how bail affects so many parts of our society and the importance of it right now when we're having so much change in the world. Bail is really a stabilizing.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree, but we are being the change in the world. I mean, hence with you with Turning Leaf, who's helping to sponsor this event, Angels Bail Bonds, and of course, searchandmate.com. So thank you for the sponsoring. Why don't we dive right into the current events, since that's what we're here about.
So one of the 2 bills I want to talk about today is a bill that we've been trying to get for a long time, which is to have some regulation of the fugitive recovery, otherwise known as bounty hunters, with the state. And we finally got in the Department of Insurance to agree.
What's it called? Is it called the bounty hunter bill, or the fugitive recovery?
I think it's 20,
or the bail
20,
enforcement agent bill, or the Boba Fett bill, or
they named it bail bonds, but it's essentially the regulations of and some really common sense regulations of who gets to do the fugitive recovery work. With bail, one of the real differences with bail or most government pretrial is if the defendant fails to appear, there is a penalty that has to be paid, and to avoid that penalty, the bail agents and the family, they hire their professional fugitive recovery people to go out and to bring the person back so that we can have a trial, so that we can see if there is justice at all.
So let's let them catch up, because you're using a lot of advanced words that are more nuanced. So a person does a bail bond.
Yes.
And they sign a contract to guarantee that they're going to make all of their court appearances.
Yes.
And if they don't make all of their court appearances, then there can be a warrant filed for their arrest. And once that warrant is issued, then they become a fugitive. Yes. And they have a period of time to go back to court or be brought back to court. Usually they bring themselves back to court, but sometimes it happens that they need to be brought back to court. And then the fugitive status is removed. And the bail is to stand, assuming the bail agency is willing to reassume the liability of a bail bond. At that point, the bail agency needs to turn in a paperwork called a reassumption, and that's that's usually where the defendant and the bail agent are like, okay, you didn't go to court. Oh, well, I slept in. Well, why did you sleep in? Well, my cat died. Okay, that makes sense. Or I got stoned. All right, well, we need you to come into our office and explain your judgment that led you to that point. And how do we prevent you from having poor judgment again? Because not only are you on the line, we're on the line, and we guaranteed to the judge that you're going to go to court. All right.
That's exactly right. And that is how bail works and why bail is so much better. If you contrast that to government pretrial, the same person fails to appear.
Well, that's a great thing, but let's focus on the bounty hunter first.
Exactly.
The second point is the pretrial, right?
Well, I understand, but the reason that we need the bounty hunter, the fugitive recovery regulations, is because when you have bail going out and bringing the people back as opposed to law enforcement and opposed to the pretrial, it's much safer because you're able to deal with the family, and the fugitive recovery agent doesn't have the same duties or the same overhead that a police officer would. So in that same scenario that you just gave, the way that a bail agent would handle that, call the person, come in, talk to them, try and resolve it, get them back into going to court again, reassume the liability of the bond, stand up for them again, that actually solves the problem. That gets the person going to court. So many of the pretrial systems are more concerned about retrieving the ankle monitor that's been cut off rather than to bring the person back. And the only way the person gets back into the system is when they're caught for the next crime. How many crimes have they committed before they're caught? Because nobody's having that conversation that the bail agents have because they don't have the incentives. So I'm happy that I've got a bill coming out of California that I can support again. I'm really proud of all the work that I helped do in the 90s and the early 2000s to set up this system that produces 999 of the people that bail agents have let out on bail out of every 1,000 back to court. They either never fail to appear, or those conversations you have with them, you get them back into court.
So
and,
to this
and
stuff
having that licensed again will help keep everyone safer. So I'm glad that California and the Department of Insurance are finally doing that.
Well, can we clarify what specifically it is? Because I think some of the work you're mentioning from the 90s and 2000s is requiring people to have of some kind of a license, not have certain felonies, to be able to apprehend fugitives. But what is more that is being done in this bill that hasn't been done before that's taking it a step further?
Yeah, the bill is actually very simple. It just has some very simple licensing requirements, which are really but the difference is that you now have a state agency, the Department of Insurance, who will monitor to make sure that the fugitive recovery agents actually meet those qualifications. And because bounty hunting is an exciting job that a lot of people want to get into,
right.
and they may have had a felony. They may not be safe. They may not be a person who you really want to do that. So having some regulation for that is I think it's important. And that's not been there because really no regulatory agency has wanted to take on the burden of supervising those who are picking up the fugitive recovery. But the police go out and do fugitive recovery. It's one of the most dangerous things they do. And it's dangerous to the family. It's dangerous to society. Bounty hunters have many better tools to make that a much safer process, and a lot of it is just what you described with the conversations that you have.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to argue your point. I don't think that being a bounty hunter is really that exciting. If you're a good bounty hunter, it's very boring because you're very patient and you mitigate the risks before they escalate, or you anticipate, or you read the people. Not just the defendant, because you're not usually dealing with the defendant, but you're dealing with the loved one. And you're knowing that they want to make sure that their loved one's protected. But if you're able to infer the nonverbal cues of how they communicate or what they say or when they're lying, then you can anticipate the problems before they occur, and you can control the scenario as much as you'd like to. A difference between a bounty hunter and a police officer or somebody that's put into it is they're not spending their whole focus on that person, and they don't have the amount of time that a bounty hunter would be able to put in. And that bounty hunter is going to put in their time because they're not going to get paid if they don't perform. Whereas as a police officer is like, all right, I have a certain amount of quota. I have to do a certain amount of work. I have to adhere to a certain standard and policy. I may have had to deal with this call, which has put me in this different mode of
They have
thought.
to preserve evidence.
Yes.
They have to not ask the wrong questions. Right? There's a lot involved in in any law enforcement interaction, and our police, for good reasons, are trained to protect themselves. They're trained to go out in those circumstances and to protect themselves. And sometimes to protect themselves, it becomes a more aggressive situation that the bail agents, because they're the bounty hunters and the fugitive recovery, they just have better tools to be able to minimize that. But I agree with you. Bounty hunting and fugitive recovery is not an exciting thing to do, but many people don't know that, and they think it is. All the Mandalorian and so forth.
No, I remember a story. I mean, I'm able to be a bounty hunter now. Many of the older bail agents that have had their licenses don't have to go through and get licensed as a bounty hunter. But I remember we were putting out a interview for people to come in and be bounty hunters.
Yeah.
And one of the first guy had a glaring resume, but he had a something where you carry a gun here, and he opened up the back of his car, and he had 3 guns, and he had a gun on him, and he came in. And right off the bat, I said, thank you, but we're not interested. Go away. And he's like, what the? And anybody that wants to brandish a weapon or be able to show who they are is not a true bounty hunter, no matter how good their resume is, because it's not about power.
Yeah.
You don't apprehend people out of power.
Right.
You build trust. You build relationships. You build rapport. You try and work with the person to get them out. You don't try and trick them or manhandle them. So if you're a former military, and we get a lot of former military or bounty hunters, and they're great, but if you're looking for action, this is the wrong profession.
That's so true. I'm glad you said it so strongly, because it does happen, that fugitive recovery, you're out in dangerous circumstances, but you have to do everything ahead of time to avoid that. And that does often make it boring.
Yeah.
But it is much safer than any of the interactions you have with the police or the government pretrial.
All right, so getting on to the government pretrial, let's wrap that up on the bill. And so I'm excited with it. We didn't even talk about why it's better, but clearly, I guess all of that was why it's better. Why don't you lead into why we don't like the guilty before innocent bill?
Yeah, I mean that name for the
bill.
Yeah, the guilty before innocent. So, government pretrial is a very different process than bail, and and their ability to try and duplicate that has been disastrous. So, one of the things that
does everybody know pretrial? We've already discussed this before. Should we explain what it is?
So the government, in certain circumstances in California, they've developed a system where government workers will gather information about the defendant, prepare a report for the court, and then use that report in in a whole bunch of circumstances to define bail.
So wait, you gave me a thought. Let's say you're the government worker.
Right.
Ask me a question.
Where do you live?
I thought I had a Fifth Amendment. I'm innocent until proven guilty. I'd like to speak with my attorney. Now
but
what?
It says right here, we're not going to share any of that information unless it lets you be not, unless it has your guilt. It's going to be confidential unless we have all of the excuses that they then write later in the bill.
So can my attorney be present during a pretrial? Or what if I can't afford an attorney?
Right.
Can I have a public defender help me against pretrial?
Right.
I don't know. I'm asking.
No. I mean, no.
So wait, I can't have the state protect me against the state.
Exactly. And that's what this bill is trying to do in a typically bureaucratic California style, is to set up the who gets access to that information once you've given it to the state. And the truth is, anyone can get access at a certain point. It's just all one bureaucracy that shares that.
Well, don't we have a number of, besides the Fifth Amendment, aren't you saying the 13th Amendment?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Why don't you explain the 13th Amendment?
So the 13th Amendment is the limitation on slavery unless you're convicted of a crime. If you look at the movie Lincoln with Daniel Day-Lewis, it's all about, it's a great movie because it really shows the passion of why Lincoln really needed to get the 13th Amendment passed, but it also is limited. It didn't eliminate slavery like most people think. It just, you have to be convicted of a crime. So there's been a problem ever since sense then of the states sometimes overtly, selling the labor of the inmates, and sometimes just using their power to restrict the liberty and the social connection.
So this isn't the guilty before innocent. This is the enslave and get you to use information against yourself before you're innocent bill.
Exactly, because I mean, practically, that's exactly what it does. And
who's supporting this, and why would this junk pass?
The people who are supporting it are the people who want to hire more government pretrial workers because it's a bureaucratic job. It's the unions that have really been pushing SB 10. Mm-hmm. And even though the voters voted SB 10 out, which was the bill that got rid of bail and changed it to pretrial, they've still funded and implemented the pretrial bill, and now they're trying to lock it in and expand the power.
So wait. So the people of the state of California voted to keep bail.
Yes.
But the ones that were against it still pushed through laws or some way to adhere to something, and then they're making that something bigger, even though everybody voted against it.
Absolutely,
or the majority.
5 million. Yeah, it was a huge, a 5 million vote margin. Absolutely, and it's working terribly. Government pretrial is it just has very high recidivism rates, and it has very high failure to appear rates, and it has no resources bringing the people back to court and doing nothing to actually help the families. In fact,
and so recidivism is when you get out of jail and you end up going back to jail before you're tried for the first time you were arrested, and then most likely released again, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen all the stories around the whole country now with the anti-bail bills that have just had a revolving door, where people are getting arrested dozens and dozens and dozens of times, and just going out and continuing to commit the crimes.
I guess if I was going to use data, and I'd say, yeah, we pre-trialed somebody out, and they didn't forfeit. Well, if they got rearrested, then they did forfeit, but they were back in custody, so that doesn't count as a forfeiture. So that could be a way to distort the data to look artificially lower than it is, even though I know I'm more scared now than I was 10 years ago, and I'm reading in the news about crime being up and murders and this and that. So obviously something's happening, unless the matrix is, I don't know, COVID, matrix, we're all locked down. I figured we'd stay in our homes, but I don't know.
Are we in an alternate timeline? I was asking that the other day.
I tend to think so. If we're following laws that didn't pass,
right?
What is that called?
Right. And in New York, at least, they're trying to get rid of trying to limit the anti-bail laws. In California, they're just doubling down and giving, trying to make it even more. But it doesn't work, because that no matter what report you give to a judge, or no matter what information is in that report when they're setting the bail, some people are still going to fail to appear, and some people are you're still going to have, no matter what their past was, right. It doesn't tell what their future is. Some of the hardest cases bail agents have is you bail someone out for fairly routine crime, and then they commit another crime, and they're running from that. I mean, that does happen occasionally. You can't stop that from happening. But with bail, you minimize the negative consequences for that, and you get the best balance for the criminal justice system.
Yeah, no, like I had mentioned before in a previous podcast, how a mother wanted to bail out her kid for the 7th or 8th time, and I'm like, heck no. Right. Yeah, I'm not going to let you pay me to bail him out. Right. She got mad at me, and I'm like, what are you doing? You're only, I forget what you're, helicopter parent, or you're helping to promote bad behavior. Yeah, let's sit down and have a coffee and talk it through. And her daughter was there, and she's trying to explain for him, but understanding with me, and it's like,
well, and that's why Turning Leaf is building the coalition with the nonprofits, the rehabilitation, those community organizations with bail, to be able to give people help when they need it. It's a very simple system. Turning Leaf actually doesn't do much more than the turn. Once you have an indemnitor on a bail bond, we just do a safety check, make sure everyone's okay, everyone has a place to be.
And an indemnitor is someone that guarantees the defendant's appearance in court.
Right.
Often the defendant can be the indemnitor, or the indemnitor could be a friend, a family member, a loved one, anybody that is recognized as being stable in the community. And it doesn't have to be having money, doesn't have to be having great credit. It could be social fabric, as you like to say, where somebody let's say a reverend, this person, you're not going to not go to court if the reverend sides for you, because the whole community is going to shun you or your family is going to be ashamed. And that weighs so much more than the amount of the collateral.
You can't hide from your social network. And so if you have a socially significant person that has a liability that they have to pay for you, that socially significant
I don't know.
person,
I mean, isn't Zuckerberg trying to get away from that to the metaverse because of other stuff? But that's something else.
I don't. Yeah. We'll talk about the metaverse next podcast. Yeah. So the process, the decision-making process that they're trying to implement with government pretrial simply does not function. It doesn't have the right
well, now, like you had
incentives.
mentioned, had we talked about before, the Arnold tool, which is an algorithm that's owned by a former Enron executive. Like whenever I hear Enron and I think, hey, there was a lot of stuff that went on, and I'm thinking, okay, Arnold tool, Enron, like, let's put two and two together. Maybe there is a problem here. Maybe not. I don't know. But
well, I'd like to see how much money California spent on that compared to what it would cost to just subsidize bail for everyone who qualifies for the public defender. They could probably have just paid for everybody's bail for what they have given the guy. You remember what Arnold was most famous for is Enron. I mean, he stole our so much money from our electrical system. Gaming those the electrical.
And even to your point, how much money is spent to be keeping people in jail, to have to pay for their laundry and their food and make sure that they're mentally sound. I mean, we're upwards, I think it's between 38 to 50,000 a year for an inmate, and 80, 85, 90% of them aren't even in there for violent crimes. Why don't we just use that money to help make sure they go to court and have them out with their families so they don't have an opportunity cost of not being able to work, not being able to take their kid to school, having that social interaction with the family that's being lost because they're in jail.
Right.
To your point, why spend it on pretrial, which is government pensions and inflated costs, where we're having our California is not even able to pay its bills.
Well, to get information that really doesn't help you solve the problem.
Yeah.
Right? Because, the most of the information that they're trying to gather in these investigative reports that they're trying to expand, in my opinion, is useless to determine whether the defendant will come to court or not. And it's just an excuse to be able to increase the conditions that they have. The other problem with government pretrial, even if they don't hold you in custody, they often make you waive your Fourth Amendment rights. I had a published opinion.
Can you explain what the Fourth Amendment rights are?
Yeah, Fourth Amendment is your right to privacy. For the government not to search you without a warrant. Almost all of the people who are released on government pretrial are required to waive those Fourth Amendment rights, and they often on bail they're making them do that as well, especially if it's both.
For example, it goes back to that ankle monitor. Imagine you're in bed with your chick, your kids are asleep, you've been waiting for a month to be able to have an intimate moment, and boom, you scratch you with the ankle monitor. Well, there goes that privacy. Or if you want to be in a shower and you want to just relax and get that, but now you got to have your leg outside of the shower. You are. That is a form of slavery. That's not different than almost a ball and chain, having a leg out, leg in.
Yeah, or home arrest. A lot of these dynamics. And when you've got a system that performs as well as California bail does, the laws I was referring to in the 80s and 90s that I helped with were laws like the extensions of time, so we can get another 6 months if we've been looking for a defendant. Penal Code 1305G, if you go anywhere in the world and you find the defendant and have him identified by law enforcement and the DA doesn't want to extradite, then you can get an exoneration. If they do want to extradite, the bail pays for the cost of the extradition and we bring them back.
So what are some elements in pretrial that they're trying to push through now that they don't have from before?
Well, look, in my experience, most judges like bail because the judges that are, especially for arraignment, they see that people show up when they're on bail, and government pretrial, they don't. So what I've seen, as far as I can tell, is the judges are looking at these investigative reports they're giving them now, and they're rejecting their findings. The judges often don't follow what the pretrial recommends because, the judges have their own experience.
But to that point, why is the Judicial Council still permitting pretrial?
Yeah, look, why they're still doing that is I think just a matter of control. I think the government likes to control the criminal justice system as much as they can, and it's difficult for a lot of the people in the government to understand the neutral bail agent position. And there's a lot of territorial battles between the state and bail agents because their duties overlap and their techniques are so different. So I do think that there are some in the mostly in the Democratic establishment, but also that they just think that the government should do the job rather than private entities.
But I mean, more specifically to this bill, what in addition do you think that they're trying to add that isn't being implemented currently?
Well, they're just trying to get more information into those reports and then to be able to have those reports, the flow of those reports that they go around. And
do you know what kind of information in addition they're looking for? Like more information about loved ones or occupational status or marital status or sexual history, preference of dog, cat? I mean, what kind of information is it that they would be wanting to push? And how could it not be relevant to anything?
Well, one of the real problems with all of those is that, the criminal justice system has been recognized to have.
I guess it goes in line with your Fourth Amendment right to privacy. Right. No matter what they ask, it doesn't matter. It's none of your fucking business.
Well, that's true. That there you go. That's a good point, because not only does it matter, but it actually, because they can't make the right decisions, they don't have the right incentives to make the right decisions on who to let out and who not to let out. Right. They really can't say no. They're just. I find the whole.
So it's just a reach of greater power. Okay.
Exactly. It didn't work, and so they want more power. That's just what I hear from the
Who's supporting this bill?
It was.
I know you said the unions, but which politician can we write and say thank you so much for trying to take our privacy?
Yeah, it is.
And reinforce further slavery.
Cholera is the
cholera.
Cholera. It's not cholera. Cholera. KALRA.
Okay, so call up Congressman Cholera and let him know you want your privacy and you don't really like slavery.
And getting this additional information is not going to make their decisions any better. It's not going to make us any safer, but it is going to be. It's going to give the government information that they don't deserve outside of the process that we have set up.
Is there any information that the government deserves, you think? Or is that a fine line? And that's all.
Well, they've got to prosecute a crime, right? So they're obviously they have the investigators and they have to think.
Right, but is that pretrial's role? I thought that you're. So now that goes back to innocent until proven guilty. But oh wait, we need to prosecute a crime. We're going to ask you a few questions, but you don't have to answer. But you do have to answer as a condition of the release. Oh wait, so am I innocent until proven guilty, or are you going to put me on an interrogation stand and I got to be able to tell you something? Whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing, but something to be able to stay out as a condition of my release. Well, and so is that even fair?
Yeah, of course not. And think of the context. You've just been arrested, and now you have to get out. And to get out, you have to try and please this person.
Yeah.
And you got to talk. And do you think they're going to not ask you the questions? Right?
I'm sure they're going to ask.
And so a lot of the information they're trying to get is also information like of your past interactions with the criminal justice system, your family's past interactions, and we know a lot of that's racist.
And to that point, I mean, we got to wrap it up. But I mean, I get a lot of customers that ask me. They give me their story. They ask me, and I'm like, I'm your bondsman. I'm not going to give you legal advice. You need an attorney. Contact an attorney. I personally, I don't know what I would do, but I'm not going to get into it because that's your business, not mine.
Right.
All right. So, what did we learn today? I mean, what was the fun points?
Yeah, Sean. I really liked just your discussing of that bail process and what happens when somebody fails to appear and how you get them back into court and the power of persuasion that you use because of the incentives. I really enjoyed hearing you talk about that.
Thank you so much for that, man. I enjoyed hearing how you think about any way possible to be able to help families out from having to pay the state for something that, I don't know, it probably shouldn't have even happened in the first place, but if it did, you're there, you got their back. So with that, some of the key points, due process. Reach out to Congressman Cholera. You don't want your privacy invaded. You don't want to bring back slavery. And what was the thing about the bounty hunter? We want the bounty hunter bill to
the
pass.
Department of Insurance
because you'll be safer.
Yeah, exactly.
You'll be safer because you don't have to worry that someone else is going to get involved. You're going to have licensed people to make sure that they're doing their job and they're incentivized to do the job right. And the majority of the bounty hunters don't seek action. They seek resolution.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All the bounty hunters I work with, their first priority is safety, and they have the time and the ability to actually safely bring somebody in. It is orders of magnitude safer than sending the police fugitive recovery units.
Would you like to close us out?
Thank you. Yes. I will do my best. We got to. I don't.
So John is founder of Turning Leaf, which helps out families of defendants to bring them back, to make it easier for them, to help them through it.
And trying to build a coalition with the nonprofits that are already helping defendants with bail, to give those nonprofits the opportunity to help the families when they really need it. And I think that's how we if you have strong communities, you have a strong society and healthy individuals.
Great. And I'm Sean Plotkin, the owner of Angels Bail Bonds, formerly Plotkin Bail Bonds, a multi-generational bail bond business, and the author of this book, Get Bail, Leave Jail. If you listen to everything we said, or you listen to nothing, but you want informed decision-making, you want to be able to get this book, reach out to me at sean@searchinmate.com, one of our sponsors. I'm also the owner of searchinmate.com, where you have a loved one who you haven't seen in a while. You could do a nationwide warrant check, and we'll help you find them.
And thank you so much, Sean. And
Thank you,
just
John.
my final thought, we all need to listen to each other.
Absolutely.
And I'd like you to listen wherever you find your podcasts. What
yeah, I
is
think
phrase?
It's rate, review, or subscribe to your favorite mode of listening to our podcast.
Excellent, Sean. Thank you.
Good find.